This is the Rebel Author Podcast, where we talk about books, business, and occasionally bad words. Hello, Rebels, and welcome to the Rebel Author Podcast, episode 47. Today, I'm talking to Kay Hutchison all about self-care. We delve into all sorts of wild and wonderful aspects of self-care as creators. And I'm sure you guys realise that I am not very good at self-care. So this was a pertinent and lesson learnt type of episode for me. But first to last week's question, which was, what writing or editing software do you use? So first in was Ritu, who said more recently Scrivener for writing, but Word for some things. Victoria L.K. Williams said Dragon Anywhere for dictation, Scrivener for writing, and you've got to try this new one, which she loves, Plotter for outlining. And my iPad's getting delivered this week, so I have decided to try Plotter before I kick off my next book. So yeah, I am going to try that. So thank you for the recommendation. Gloria McBreen said, just Word for me, am I missing out? Carrie Hadisky said, I use Scrivener mostly, but Google Docs for a backup, and because sometimes I write at work or on my phone. Yeah, and I'm moving towards putting Scrivener in my Scrivener documents in Dropbox, because you can access it across different platforms whereas you can't if it's in the iCloud. So yeah, I am trying to do more accessible things on different platforms as well. Jeff Adams says, I use Scrivener. I love how it helps organize everything. Naomi Kennedy said Scrivener for writing and Dropbox for backup syncing across platforms. Now I'm curious to check out Plotter. I've also heard great things about Aeon Timeline. Does anyone use it? I don't know if you guys do. I haven't heard of it. But yeah, if you have, tweet me or message in the Facebook group and let me know. Tom Fowler says Scrivener for writing. He also uses Pro Writing Aid. He brought the lifetime subscription on a sale a couple of years ago to clean things up before sending it to his editor. And I have to say, I am going to be buying the lifetime subscription too once this year's runs out. I think it's amazing. Edwin said Scrivener, Jot a text editor on his phone. Val Neal said Scrivener. Tango said Scrivener. Lots and lots of Tango users. No, sorry, Tango. Lots and lots of Scrivener users. This is what happens when you try and read and record at the same time. Renee said, I use YWriter to write, which I haven't heard of, and save the files to Google Drive. I export to Word to edit and have the Pro Writing Aid plugin. She also brought the lifetime subscription. And Matt says currently just writing in Pages, which is an Apple product. And Jasmine also loves Scrivener. So yeah, lots of Scrivener lovers out there, and a few Pro Writing Aid lovers and some other ones too. So this week's question is, what self-care do you do? My book recommendation this week is Save the Cat Writes a Novel by Jessica Brody. This is a nod to the original Save the Cat book, which was about screenwriting. I'm about 100 pages through, and it is good. I think it's good. It is a great reminder of structure and story structure in particular, and the different genres and how those things apply to structure, and also by genre, some of the key things that you need to include. It's not necessarily, it is a great book, but I don't think I'm personally learning too much that's new, but I really like the angle that they're taking, and so yeah, I do think it's worthwhile, and I think it's a great reminder as well. So perhaps not something if you've been, writing stories for 25 years, but I also think we always should be improving our craft and intentionally trying to improve that. So it might be a good reminder. Yeah, so I do recommend it, no matter what point of the journey you are in. Personal update this week. I don't really know where this week has gone. It's been a funny old week. I'm really, really tired. I hit about 11:30 in the morning on Friday, and I just stopped. I was staring at the screen. I had no idea what I'd been doing for the last hour, and I just stopped. And it's now Sunday, and I haven't really worked since Friday, and I still feel absolutely fucked. So I am obviously, stepping close to the edge of burnout, I think. So I need to try and be a bit more careful next week and try not to put too much pressure on myself to continue to deliver things. But this week I continued drafting Sirens. Actually, I'm not sure if I was drafting it last week. I can't remember what I said in my update. But anyway, I'm now about 7,000 words in. I continued working on the Anatomy of Prose course and hit a massive brick wall with it and decided to completely change what I'm doing. So I am still going to, so I have literally, I have so many modules that I will still be releasing, but I am going to release lots of mini courses and then bundle them together at the end. And the reason for this is when I was looking at like the 100 things I had to do by the 8th of October for one course, which was meant to be small and just kept ballooning, I just got completely overwhelmed. So what I'm doing instead is narrowing the course dramatically so that I can go deeper into one particular topic. And then once I've done that topic, I will look at another topic in the Anatomy of Prose and then go narrow and deep into that one and then release that course and so on and so forth until I get through the whole fucking thing. So, and then I will be able to bundle it for anybody who wants the entire course. But yes, there are so many lessons I learnt there, which I'm just not going to go into right now. But suffice to say, I kind of have to start again, but I'm not losing anything that I've done. And on the Anatomy of Prose course, I am also doing a webinar with Pro Writing Aid, which you may have heard me mention briefly last week. It's on the 8th of October, and I'm going to include a link in the show notes if you would like to sign up to that webinar, and it's called How to Breathe Life into Your Story, Characters and Sentences. What else? I think that's probably it for this week. Yeah, I'm gonna leave it there, and hopefully I'll have more to update you with next week. Okay, so the Rebel of the Week this week is anonymous. How mysterious. So Anonymous says, for years, I wanted to get my books traditionally published. I had a grand idea of what it looked like to be an author with a big house. When that contract finally came, I signed on the dotted line without doing much research. Working with a publishing house and an editor was a learning experience to say the least, and I would never trade it. But without the marketing push that I always expected from a traditional deal, it soon became evident that I was producing more than getting in return. Over the years, outside of negotiating a new deal or getting the manuscript to them, communication was less than stellar. I wouldn't hear an answer about a query for weeks, sometimes months, and it began to seem like a one-sided relationship where I wasn't making the money I needed to sustain a career. Unfortunately, I fell into the trap that so many traditional authors do and found myself in the loop of the option clause. That little bugger forced me into more contracts, and I always felt the pressure to keep signing. With each new contract, I told myself that it would be different, but it turned out it was only different when I stood up for the books in the way they didn't. After hiring an ad manager, I saw more sales for the 2 novels than I did for the others before combined. I learned that with a little love, these books could flourish, and I wanted that for any forthcoming ones. I'm a strict rule follower, and the idea of saying no to a book deal terrified me. But one thing I know for sure is that I deserved more, and I had found that for myself when I pushed my books out there for readers to find. If my publisher couldn't do the same, then why the hell was I staying with them? While many emerging authors would kill for book deals, I understood that I needed a business partner to help me get more for my books than I could on my own. So with a new deal on the table from my publisher for books I was no longer excited to write for them, I politely and professionally turned it down, unsure of what the outcome would be. I finally found my voice and my worth, and I'm terrified and excited to see what the future holds, with hopefully more fun and rebellious actions against those who don't have this author's best interests in mind. I love that. I love that it's a story of empowerment. I love that it has an arc and a journey, and that you are coming to the dark side of indie. And I am wildly biased about that. Yeah, I do think that many authors who want to be traditionally published assume that they are going to get more support for their books than they actually do in reality. And I think that's a dangerous myth that perpetuates, because it leads so many authors astray, and then they can't afford to leave their day jobs or whatever. So please make sure you guys, if you are thinking of going traditionally published, that you are acutely aware of what marketing support you're actually going to get after you have signed those contracts. If you would like to be a Rebel of the Week, then please do send in your story. It can be any kind of rebellion, big, small, or somewhere in between. You can email your Rebel story to rebelauthorpodcast@gmail.com or tweet me at rebelauthorpod. No new patrons this week, but a huge thank you as always to all of my current patrons. I really can't tell you how much I appreciate you, especially in the current climate. I appreciate that you help me keep the pod going, that you make me feel like, you want more of the podcast. So thank you. I really do appreciate it. If you would also like to support the show and get early access to all of the episodes as well as bonus content, then you can from as little as $2 a month by visiting patreon.com/Sacha Black. And that's Sacha with a C and not an S. This week's episode is sponsored by Kobo, so I will play a word from them and then we'll get on with the show.
Hi, I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Tara.
And we're from Kobo Writing Life. Kobo's free, fast and easy self-publishing platform. KWL was built by authors for authors, and our team of dedicated book lovers is always working hard to help authors reach new readers around the world.
We wanted to tell you a little about Kobo's global reach. From our home base here in Toronto, we work hard to keep customers reading all over the world. And as a KWL author, you're doing your part too. Here are some tips that can help your books stand out globally.
At Kobo Writing Life, you can set the price in 16 currencies. When you're pricing your book, you should consider how your prices are being shown globally in our store. Is your $5.99 USD price showing as $4.69 in British pounds? Chances are an offered price will likely just sway the purchase of your book. Make sure you are manually setting the price in all currencies.
Speaking of all the worldly currencies, you can also set price promotions with KWL that are currency specific. Want to honor Canada Day with a promotion? You can do that in Canadian dollars and leave your other prices just as they are.
And we haven't even mentioned all the partner stores Kobo has around the world. Did you know that you can target your marketing to our partners directly? If you want to learn more about this or any aspects of KWL, check out the Kobo Writing Life podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts, and find us on social.
You can create your free account today at kobo.com/writinglife. We hope to see your books on Kobo very soon. Happy writing!
Hello and welcome back to the Rebel Author podcast. Today I am joined by Kay Hutchison. Kay is a content creator with a background in radio, TV and publishing. After 2 music degrees at Glasgow University, she joined BBC Radio as a producer before moving across to TV with Channel 4. She went on to lead the launch teams for both Disney TV and Channel 5. She started her own company, Bell Media, and then launched Bell Kids Publishing in 2015, producing multi-platform conservation-focused content for children. Her first non-fiction book is My Life in 37 Therapies, part guide, part memoir, and she narrated the audiobook version that came out this year. And for listeners listening in the future, that's 2020. Welcome, Kay.
Lovely to be here. Thank you very much for asking me, Sacha.
No, you're most welcome. It's a pleasure to speak to you, especially after I've had you in my ears. So before we start, tell everyone a little bit more about you. I would love to hear more actually about the media and the TV and the radio that you've been doing. So tell everyone a little bit about your journey, and then your writing journey specifically, and how you got to where you are today.
Very good, no problem. So obviously I'm Scottish. I was born and brought up in Greenock in Scotland, which is near Glasgow. I'm now a small independent publisher of mainly children's books. And as you said, we produce conservation focus books. One of the titles is Tigeropolis, conservation themes like protecting a tiger's natural habitat, but turned into fun stories for kids that are more appealing. Done audiobooks, activity books as the video game, but formerly I was in TV and radio, as you just outlined. I think probably safe to say that creative writing was always a part of my work in some way or the other. But I had a massive life change, which I recount in the book, and everything changed a lot. And I'll talk about that in a minute. But I had always wanted to work for the BBC. Even when I was small, my friends say to me, I was always talking about I wanted to go and work in the BBC. So when I graduated, my last year at university, I went along to student television, where I ended up learning some of the ropes there. And I immediately began applying for jobs. My degrees were in music and French, but I was really keen on using that really in some way in a career. So I applied. I didn't get in first time, but I applied to be a studio manager for BBC Radio. And I got in the next year, and that was after I did some work at Decca Records, which lots of people know. And I was a kind of a studio manager, so I learned all about how all the twiddles and knobs work. And I ended up very quickly becoming a music producer for BBC World Service, which was, I really felt it was a great place for me to be. But that TV thing was always in my mind. I loved doing the radio programs, but I got an opportunity to become a network director at Channel 4. And so I moved across there, and I ended up then staying in television from there on in. And a lot of my work was around making promotion, looking after the branding for the TV channels. And I basically just worked my way up. And I didn't move quickly, but I stayed in Channel 4 for about 8 years, learning all the ropes there, and ending up sort of finding out about, basically the sort of media, who's watching trailers that goes on to watch the actual programs, things like that, as well as creating. I made some programs, and I also made lots of trailers in the middle of, between the programs. So that went on really well, and I actually worked my way up very well, and I ended up being headhunted to go back to BBC Broadcast, which was a 1,500 strong team, to help them. Actually, they were about to be sold by the BBC, and they needed to become more culturally and commercially focused, and they brought me back in because I'd worked in commercial channels. And basically I ended up working for every single department there, and eventually I became Director of Client Services and then Director of Partnerships for that company, right in the middle of doing my most beloved project, which was looking at, as a partnership, at the legacy to the Olympic Broadcast Centre for 2012. I lost my job. Yes, it was 2008, and yes, you could say it was the crash, but you always think it's your own fault, and what did I do wrong? But actually, I ended up leading, or had been leading, there's about 50 companies, all the big companies, ITV, BBC, in actually pushing for something that would be of value after the games was over. It only happens for 2 weeks. There's massive investment, and then the roadshow goes on. I was absolutely determined that out in the East End of London, we would have a centre for jobs. And actually, I couldn't think of anything better than having it there, lots of creative energy, and also doing something in media, which is really attractive to, well, anybody. So I ended up doing that, but I ended up doing that even after I'd been made redundant. So it was kind of around this time that everything was kind of going wrong for me, and I ended up writing a book about this period. So if you read the book, there are things about the work that I was doing and the threat of it all just collapsing and me collapsing as well. In terms of the writing though, I ended up trying lots and lots and lots of therapies to get myself back on track because everything had gone. And one of my friends who knew that I liked trying new things, she's a Pilates teacher, Roz, she was going off on a writing retreat with Mavis Cheek, and she said, oh look, I don't want to go on my own, why don't you come with me? You like retreats, you'll love it. And I was thinking, well, I've done creative writing all my life, but actually not actual writing. So off I trot, and we had all this homework, and it was quite a shock for me. And then when I started doing the homework, I realised that I was really enjoying this, and it wasn't difficult, and I was writing and writing and writing. Got to the writing retreat, and of course it's full of really, really experienced people. So it was a bit of a baptism of fire, but that started me writing. So that's how I got to where I am, and I'd already started a little company myself, and that eventually morphed into the little independent publisher of children's books as well. So that's what I've been doing, and then I wrote my own book.
Would you ever consider writing for media and BBC, do you think?
Of course. I mean, the funny thing is that I've had a huge number of BBC radio interviews, and actually I'm now doing a podcast about books and stories, which I just started. And it's so much, it feels like home to me because it's what I always did. And I mean, you just have to write. I mean, I'm writing every single day of my life. Either it could be press releases, it could be new creative writing for my next book. So no problem with that, really. I can't see a problem with that. Yeah, I'd love to.
I think it's funny, so many things in life come full circle. So when I was a teenager, I used to do voiceover work, and I did some radio work, and I did some, back in the day, we had CD-ROMs, but I did like CD-ROM work and stuff. And I never, once I left that behind, I never thought that I would come back to it. But of course, here I am.
Yes,
Podcasting.
You've got a very lovely voice and accent, actually. So I think these things just bubble to the surface again, don't they?
They do, and it's funny you say that. That's exactly why I podcast, because I had enough people say to me, "Oh, you know, we love listening to your voice. You should do this," and I was like, "Oh no." And anyway, here I am.
Now you love it, and now you love it.
I really do, because it's enough contact. Like, you get to speak to wonderfully interesting people with amazing backgrounds, and share the learnings, both from them, from you, from the learnings from this interaction with other people. So it's like a win-win-win. And yes, and like, I don't know, I love the medium of audio as well. Yeah, so anyway, this isn't about me, this is about you. So tell everyone a little bit more about your new book that you just published. Well, I say just, not quite just anymore, but, you know, recently published.
Yes. So my life in 37 therapies is kind of my life story, but told through the medium of all of the therapies that I tried during this difficult period. It was a period of several years when everything was turned upside down in my life. It started off really with the moment when my mother actually died of cancer after, I mean, it was really miserable 4 years that she had. I was working in London, but going up and down to Scotland regularly, taking her to hospital, worrying about my father as well. And I think, you know, when you're in the middle of something like that, as so many people will know, you have to be on autopilot and just keeping going. And I think it was after she died where I suddenly thought, oh, I haven't even taken a breath. It's so miserable. And then, of course, you continue to worry about the people that are left. So my father was left on his own, and you know, his mum was everything to him. So it really was difficult. But then actually just a few weeks after the funeral, I discovered a lump on my husband's throat, and he also was diagnosed with cancer. The great news was that he got through it, and he was treated, chemotherapy, radiotherapy, but this was another thing to deal with, and making sure I was buying all the correct foods and looking after him. So I was working still, running back with the shopping, all that sort of stuff, just sort of just as you do, you just juggle everything, try to juggle everything. Eventually, and I will never forget when Richard got cancer, I will never forget the moment when the doctor said to us, you know, this will change your life and many things about it. So, you need to be prepared for this. Anyway, long story short, we eventually got divorced. And so I was left with my job, and that, thank goodness, that was my solid thing that I could rely on. And then I was made redundant. So the last source of my stability really for me was taken away. And I ended up, I had no thought of writing a book at this time. I was literally trying to get through, living on my own, and wondering how am I going to start again? How do I explain all this to my friends? And then, one of my friends, who obviously couldn't really give me any more advice as a good friend, she said, you've got to go and get some professional help, Kay. You can't do this yourself. So that started me. So I was already doing yoga, love a massage, and then I went to a psychotherapist. I actually ended up going to 5 in the end, but that was mainly because I was moving around as well. I was moving from rented flat to rented flat, and trying to work out where was I going to go, where was I going to stay, what was my life going to look like in the new place. So the story is told through the many therapies, and I must make a shout out for the therapists. I mean, they make these things happy for you. They're wonderful people, and I encountered the most incredible community of mainly women who are supportive, skilled, knowledgeable, and helpful in many, many ways. So I encountered many therapies along the way. So everything from the ordinary things, Reiki, reflexology, homeopathy. I did sonic therapy. It's now very popular now, but when I was doing it, it was quite unusual. Cupping, colonic irrigation, Ayurvedic retreats, and even the more extreme things of, when I was at my lowest, psychic calls and voodoo. And I'm actually a really, really grounded person. And if anyone had said to you, okay, he's going off to do this, all these people in my TV and media career would have said, you're kidding, get lost. I mean, it's Kay. She's, solid, all the rest of it. But I think this period made me reflect on so many things. My childhood, my upbringing is quite old-fashioned. And this is me suddenly, out in the wild again, on my own, and having to start again. So really, the book is about the period of time where I was going all through these things and having, it sounds like fun, but actually some of it wasn't. But they helped me come through and out the other side. And I'm still exploring new ones as well.
Oh, okay.
You get interested in it. You get very interested in it.
Absolutely. So I think under all of this is the concept of self-care. So, and that's really the topic for today's discussion. So tell me, how would you define self-care?
Well, I think actually it's so incredibly important, because I think self-care is basically making sure that you're as healthy and well as you possibly can be, physically and mentally. And that's everything, sleep, physical activity, mental clarity, positive thinking, healthy eating. But actually, I think the biggest realization that I had through writing the book was the fact that I had completely ignored self-care for most of my life, because I was too busy. B, for some reason, I was kind of so busy in the doing world, the getting on, the working hard. I mean, I worked incredibly hard. I was quite often in at weekends, workaholic, in the evenings, long days. And, and then when my mum was ill, it was basically, focus on that. What's next? Organized, be there for her, all those sort of things. And actually, I realized through this period that I completely forgotten about, actually, you actually have to look after yourself in order to be the best person you can be for others and out in the world. So it was a big revelation to me that I did feel better when I spent some time looking after my own physical and mental health.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I remember my own revelation with self-care. Self-care is a really big problem for me because there's some part of my psyche that thinks self-care is weakness. And, I'm sure I should go and explore what that really means and what the underlying things are. But I'm just too busy. Do you see but yes, so I still remember the moment I had a revelation, and I can't remember whether it was Elizabeth Gilbert's book Big Magic or whether it was her podcast, because she also did a couple of series on a podcast, and she was basically talking about this woman who had come to the realization that in order to love her family in the best possible way, she had to love herself first. And for her, that was having the time to write. When she had written, not only was she a better human, she was a happier human, she was a better parent, she was more loving, and she was then able to give out more love. And I felt so seen, so recognized, and so heard. And it's because I feel exactly the same. I want to be the best parent I possibly can be, but there is a huge part of my happiness that is derived from creation. And unless I'm able to create, I get very fucking grumpy. Yeah. And it's really hard because there's parental guilt, and I feel so guilty about that. And like that I'm not sure if it's that I don't deserve that time or what, but I definitely feel like that should always come second, and it shouldn't, because it provides our house. No, it pays the bills. But yes, anyway, I think there is a lot of stigma in society about self-care, and
all I can say is try Scotland, because honestly, when I was bringing out this book, you can imagine, I could hear my father, he's now dead, he passed away a couple of years ago, but he would be saying, oh, for goodness sake, get back in your bike. What's all this therapy stuff you're doing? It's sort of stuff nonsense. But I think looking at me growing up, I mean, I think the biggest revelation for me was that growing up, quite often, you make up your mind about things when you're a very young person with a very unsophisticated brain that's thinking, that's good, that's bad. And you pick up a lot of it from the people around you, your family as well, and also just the culture that you're in. And I do think that the guilt, I had tremendous guilt. I mean, guilty about everything. I mean, you name it, just list everything that I've ever done. There'll be some guilt in there. And, that pressure is terrible on you. And often you're doing it to yourself. So I think what was great was that when I looked at things through a psychotherapist's sessions or through their eye, where they were prompting me to actually consider and reflect on why I was, why this had happened to me, there was this tremendous thing about me deciding, it's all the usual things, you're not good enough, you don't deserve, you're not important. And whether these are right or wrong, it doesn't matter. If you've got that in your mind, for whatever reason, it's very, very hard to shift. And it's something you have to work on, I think, throughout your life.
Oh, completely. I couldn't agree more with you. And yes, the problem with self-care for me is that I just don't really do it, and then I hit a brick wall and I'm forced to do it, and I'm trying very hard not to allow myself to get to that point, because it's then twice as hard to come back from it. And if I hate one thing above anything else, it's inefficiency. And so which is probably really ironic, but yeah.
I wonder if this is a Pisces trait, because I mean, you're so organized, you've got everything all beautifully done, and you also have to have that in its little box as well.
I know, I schedule time for spontaneity. If only I was joking. Okay, right. So you've done all of these therapies, that all 37 of them, or possibly more now. But now you've come through the other side of that. What exercises do you still do as a result of all the self-care and therapy experiments? And of the ones that you still do, what do you feel are the other benefits?
Well, I still do quite a lot, but the ones that I do most regularly is yoga. And I mean, honestly, I just can't recommend it enough. And the great thing is that I do see lots more people interested in yoga now. And I was talking about the fact that I hadn't really bothered about self-care. I mean, I did see myself as a machine to deliver outputs. I did. I was a robot, basically.
I feel so pulled out right now. I literally use that word all the time.
And actually, I honestly didn't have a spiritual side that I was aware of. And I think what's beautiful about yoga is you go into it for the physical and possibly the mental clarity that it provides. But actually, it really does also encompass a spiritual side to you. And I know that for a lot of people, they think that's just a bit woo-woo. But you know, once you've got it, you know what it is. You can't have it the whole time. But yoga is great because not only does it iron out all kinds of things and make the whole physical system work by easing and stretching and mobilizing every single muscle, which is so important for health. But also it does, because you have to concentrate on these things and you have to shut out everything else in order to concentrate on the exercises, it is very good for you controlling your mind. And of course, that's our biggest problem, is actually allowing our minds to just absorb all the terrible, fearful, guilty emotions. So it's good for mental focus, and then it's good for, it's just when I finish a yoga class, I really feel as if I love everybody. And I love everyone in the class, but I love everybody, because suddenly, because of self-caring for myself, I feel I can breathe and be more whole in a funny sort of a way. So yoga is a big one. I think because of my musical background, there are two things that are huge for me. Music and sonic therapy, whatever it is, it doesn't matter what it is. There are certain tracks that almost immediately send me into a really good place. And and the minute I play those, because I play them over and over and over again, because they give me this just wonderful feeling, I'm in a good place. And the other thing with a musical background, the other thing is silence and meditation. I know that sounds like a ridiculous thing to say, but when you have silence and meditation, yoga and music, that's wonderful in life. I mean, of course you need your friends and family and all that, but these are the things that are my go-to saviors when I have to keep me sane.
I love that. A couple of things. I love meditation, but I have an extremely volatile relationship with it. So, or I shouldn't say volatile. I say more of a roller coaster relationship. I will meditate for months on end consecutively every single day, and then if I lose the habit for whatever reason, it's gone for months and months and months. And so I'm in the gone phase at the moment because we've moved house twice in a year, and I've left my job just over a year ago, so everything's all, you know, and then we've had corona, so I'm completely out. I think the last time I meditated was like maybe March, maybe February, March time, just before the lockdown. But I love it because it just, I have an extremely busy brain. It's constantly going. It's like static, constant thoughts and percolations and whatever else, writing 5 stories at the same time. But meditation brings peace and calm and quiet in my brain. And so, yeah, I must get back to it. But the other thing, I was giggling to myself whilst you were talking, is about yoga. So I don't do yoga, but I do martial arts. And it's which is like the complete extreme end.
That's slightly predictable, actually, isn't it, for you? Go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, oh god. Yeah. Well, but I was laughing because a lot of the things that you were saying about having to be present and using all of your body to move, and the, you know, how you love everybody afterwards, like we punch each other but we give each other hugs at the end, you know, like you and it's this a very hilarious juxtaposition, but for a lot of the same reasons. About in that hour I have to be so fully inside my body because it's all about control and discipline and, you know, moving in those right patterns or you know, movements or whatever. And so I wonder if it is just moving your body, and it's about finding the way that you enjoy to move your body, more than it is necessarily one specific type of movement, I suppose. But yeah, fantastic.
Well, there's so many different types of yoga as well. I mean, you know, you pick the one that suits you. But I thought it was a very important point that you made about your meditation, because I don't know, it's just like more pressure in a way, but you do need to make time for self-care. So whether it's yoga or, you know, your martial arts, whether it's just eating healthily that helps your body be the best that it can be, all of these things take, and sleep, preparing for sleep, you need to actually put some effort into it, and the benefits are just enormous, but it's sometimes very hard to stop. And I don't know about you, certainly in lockdown, it's the weirdest experience in my whole life. This kind of, you can feel around you that everyone's got this underlying sort of dull feeling of anxiety, but they don't quite know what it is, a general fear. And I think it's even more important to do self-care and meditation at this time.
It's the exhaustion that's got me. The underlying anxiety has caused intense exhaustion through lockdown. And obviously part of that, we have moved house during lockdown and done a full renovation during lockdown. And we've had full-time childcare and also running a business still. And I've had 2 book launches in lockdown. So, you know, there is some of that compiled on it. But also but those are things that I would do anyway. And I really feel like the exhaustion is sourced from the anxiety, and whether or not I necessarily outwardly feel anxious, I don't think I necessarily do, but there is obviously subconscious anxiety because everybody's feeding off each other, and it's the lack of control. The control's been taken away. The control of our freedom has been taken away, and that is a cause of anxiety in and of itself. Also, you know, it's this thing about, well, who exactly is in charge of this? Yes. You know, we're doing certain things and we're trying to be good, but actually we're looking at the things that we're being asked to do, and we're thinking it doesn't seem altogether very sensible. Yeah, well, I won't get into a yeah, I don't want to politicize.
All started.
Yes, exactly. I don't want to politicize the podcast. But the sleep thing's very important. also, and a very good segue, because I want to ask why you feel self-care is so important. But I used to have a terrible relationship with sleep, and it wasn't until I worked for myself that I realized just quite how important it was. But why is self-care so important?
I think it's basically so that you can be the best person out in the world for others as well as yourself. I think it's important because you'll enjoy life, more appreciate life, and keep some sort of sense of balance in your mind and body. So no matter what is going on around, and especially at the moment where it is crazy, chaotic stuff, you can be centered if you take you pay attention to self-care. It's this centering that sort of says, you're being in the present moment, and you don't need to get caught up in all the worry. For this moment, you can actually, think about what is good and healthy for you. And it just leads to being a better person, I think, with others.
Yeah, I completely agree. So how much self-care do we need? How much does it take to get us to this good place, do you think?
Well, I think it varies for everyone, depending on what kind of personality type you are, what your role in work is as well. But I think that every day we should be, the best thing to do is to put a little bit of time aside every single day. And I like to do it before I go to bed, where I do a little bit of yoga, wind down. I do a little bit of meditation, and maybe I've switched off the telly early that night. I haven't had any decaffeinated drinks or wine in the evening that night. Maybe I've put some Epsom salts in the bath. I tell you, if you actually pay a little bit of attention to your self-care once during the day, that will be very good. And if you don't do it, for heaven's sake, don't beat yourself up, because we're all struggling to do everything. We've all got our own challenges. Just do what you can. And if you haven't done it today, well, just say, right, I'm going to do it tomorrow. But I think once a day where you're aware of the fact that you need to do something good for yourself. It might be buying yourself an ice cream, for goodness sake. That could be self-care, treating yourself. But everyone's different.
Absolutely. And I think the real takeaway for me in what you just said there is that don't beat yourself up if you don't do the self-care, because that is the complete opposite of doing self-care. And if you then haven't done the self-care, you're just making it worse. But it's so easy, and I do it all the time. Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? Because self-care can look like so many different things. So for me, and I think I only realized this very recently, being around books is a form of self-care for me. And I only realized this because I have now been parted from my books physically for probably about 6 weeks, if not maybe 8 weeks. Yeah. And it's because we moved. So we packed up the house a month before we left. And then we were due to have carpet installed last week, I think it was. Well, all my days are gone anyway, and we're not having it until the 15th of July. And it almost gives me physical pain, like, because I have this beautiful bookcase, and I don't necessarily even have to be reading the books, but just standing near them. I know it sounds bad,
it's like your family, isn't it?
Yeah,
your children.
Yeah, and when the bookcase was in the bedroom and I woke up to that view, I used to wake up and smile every single morning. And so when the bookstores in the UK opened again, I was like in like a shot, because just absorbing it. But I mean, also reading is a form of self-care for me, very much, because I am forced to sit down and be present in one thing. But yeah, it's just the fact that everybody's self-care can look different, and whatever it looks like, whatever brings you that energy and joy is right and okay. Okay, how does regular self-care help the creative process, do you think?
Well, I think for me, I can really only speak for me, but I think if I have actually been indulging, see, look, there it is, indulging in self-care. See, there it is again. It's terrible. I think I'm energized and happy and my mind is clear if I'm actually doing those things. So that when I sit down at the desk with a blank screen and I put on my music that just seems to help the creative process, and I feel good, I'm off. That's it. I get lots of ideas. The ideas flood in, and there's clarity and creativity, and I'm sort of unstoppable. And I bet you're like that too. But you do need to look after yourself, because if you're not sleeping well, if you haven't looked after what you're eating, you don't feel good about yourself, and therefore it probably means that your performance or whatever you're actually going to be doing is a bit sluggish, and it will reflect the state of mind that you've encouraged by the lack of self-care. So self-care is so important as part of the whole, I think.
Completely. And yes, I definitely, I have to input inspiration, definitely, and that is so I will like visit cemeteries or abandoned underground train stations or museums or whatever, and that is also a form of self-care. Every so often I just feel like I need to go and input, and often by myself, and I'll just go and do these things, or I'll go with my partner and we will, I just feel like putting in stimulus, but in a very, there's no technology, you're just present, you're looking, you're touching, you're with nature or whatever. It is, I completely agree. I feel more full and able to then create. All right, let's flip this on its head. Are there any self-care therapies or therapies that you don't recommend?
That I don't recommend. Can I just say something about what you were saying there, though? Because I think that was a really interesting point for me. And you mentioned solitude. And one of the things that I discovered during this time was that actually, I was so scared about it at first, but I actually love solitude. And actually, my partner thinks I'm a bit odd because I love walking in cemeteries. He will say to me, "Oh, were you off seeing the dead people again?" And I love dead trees, and I love nature and nothing. I love just ordinary nature. And I think you're absolutely right. For me, that is a huge source of self-care for me, and it's essential a bit every day or every other day. Sometimes I don't manage it, but dead trees, cemeteries, love it. Bring me more.
I like to climb into abandoned buildings. I'm a bit known for it. And I take pictures that are like, because it looks like a dystopian world, and I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing for inspiration. But in terms of cemeteries, have you ever been to Highgate?
I have. Oh, wonderful.
It's so wonderful.
Yeah.
I'm going to take my mum back, and it's just fantastic. I thought it was,
That is great for creative ideas as well, isn't it? Because you're in a peaceful place, and yet there are lots of interesting stimulus to get your creative juices flowing. Anyway, therapies that I don't recommend. Look, I know this sounds as if I'm sitting on the fence. I will tell you what mine are, but I would never say never to anyone else, because we're all completely, basically, if it makes you feel good, do it. I mean, there was a time where, I was calling psychics, and now I sort of think, oh my God, I was so reliant on that because I had no friends, or at least there were no friends that I could share what I was going through with. And I guess that psychic calls, became an important. It was like a friend that a non-judgmental friend who listened and gave me what they said were insights into the psyche, or whatever it was about some situation that was going on was making me very upset. And of course, I was on my own. I was interested in finding another partner and all those sort of things. But for a while, it made me feel better. It always makes me laugh. If you ever go on a psychic line, there's this big formal statement at the beginning that says, these calls are for entertainment purposes only. And I was sort of thinking, well, yeah, I can remember doing it as a bit of fun at maybe a party or something like that. But actually, I needed that at the time. And a lot of people really swear by it. So anything that doesn't make you feel better, don't do it. Don't force yourself. Do what makes you feel good. That's the bottom line. So I did, I probably wouldn't use psychic calls at this moment in time because I've moved on a huge amount. But there was also, I mean, I colonic irrigation. I really hoped for a seismic change in my physical appearance and mentally it would move me on, but it didn't. And it's actually
I lost 3 inches.
Well, it's very good for that. Smooth
Yeah.
skin. Yes, yes. But, you know, does it last? And no. But I think the voodoo was an interesting one, and that just didn't work for me at all. But I think it was also because at that moment in time, I was coming out of being in a very deep, dark place. And I realised that actually I'd moved on and I didn't need some of the things that they were suggesting for me to do. I mean, I had this horrendous relationship with someone. Well, actually, I was totally in love, was totally and utterly besotted. And I definitely know he reciprocated. But then it turns out that he's got someone else. So I was absolutely plunged into the depths because, again, I blamed myself and I thought, well, how could I not even see that? How did I not know that? Anyway, this voodoo person was telling me, you know, oh, you need to get this person back. And I was sort of thinking, no, I don't. Bad idea. You need to go to a department store and buy a wedding dress and a suit for him, put them in, you know, alongside. Here's an incantation. You light a candle, and you do this incantation for the next 6 weeks. And I just sort of thought, no, I'm sorry, I've completely moved on from all of that. So, but anyway, back to the more physical therapies. I mean, I did a lot. So, you know, if you do read the book, there's something in there called the re-education therapy, and it was a bit like brainwashing. It had some very, very good things in it, but it went too far. And it was great because I was strong enough that I was able to say, no, I'm not going to do any more of this. It was funny, I had people phoning me, emailing me from the course saying, oh, come back. And I just thought, no, I'm definitely done. But I think anything, you know, there's one in there called esoteric breast massage, which is exactly what you're thinking. And a friend of mine at Sky TV swore by it. And this is the really important thing. Some people will swear by the thing that doesn't work for you. Fine, try it, move on. But that was the weirdest experience. And I'm not very good with, you know, touch because I'm a Scottish Presbyterian, blah, 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 blah. So it was very well out of my comfort zone. And I eventually sort of thought, no, next, you know, and move on to the next thing. Acupuncture turned out to be great, but my first experience, you know, in a basement with a doctor that didn't speak any English, was sticking pins in me, opening noisy plastic packages, hadn't explained anything to me, not a good start. But of course, acupuncture is quite good and quite helpful.
Yeah, acupuncture has helped my, I had a car accident over a decade ago now, and have now recurring neck issues. But I found acupuncture has helped my neck issues. Okay, I think we've alluded to this already, but we're often taught to see self-care as secondary, as weakness, as something to be put on the back burner, do it later, you don't deserve it, blah, 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 all of this stuff that we've already talked about. So what would you say to those who struggle to allow themselves to do self-care?
My first reaction would probably be leave them alone because they're not ready. And, you know, we should never push someone into something that is just not for them. I think if they really want to do something for themselves, and they don't know where to start. I mean, try some different things. I mean, look up the 37 in my book, or on my website, I've got even more things that you could try. I think again, it's obviously out of the comfort zone of some people, and they should really not worry. If they don't want to do it, they don't want to do it, and that's the end of the story. But if they do want to do something, start gently. Do something very simple that is quite. I mean, I think some people like, things where there's not contact, and actually self-care is actually, it is therapy, and therapy is about anything that makes you feel better. It's exactly the same as self-care. Therapies make you feel better. So you can put in there what that definition is. But if you're meaning therapies and the sorts of things that are not just buying yourself an ice cream, something that's really physically very nourishing and good for you, or for your body or for your mind, look around at what could be very, very simple. And I think the best thing is probably meditation, a bit of guided meditation, because you're doing it on your own, you're not with anyone else. And the other thing that's great these days is that there's all kinds of different styles. Don't try one and say, oh, it's not for me. I spoke to someone the other day, and they said, oh, yoga's not for me. And I just thought, well, but there are so many different forms of yoga, so many different styles of yoga teaching, so many different personalities. It's worth seeing if you can find, if you're really dedicated to finding a way that's right for you, try the thousands of different meditations. For me, there were a couple that were, I mean, I'm not one for this, lie down, think of a scene of the beautiful country or something like that. When it's very overly done like that, it's not for me. I prefer things that are a bit more sort of easing you into it very gently. So a bit more normal people, not put on voices, very natural. It works for me. I just keep looking. You'll find something that works for you.
Okay, this is my favourite question of the podcast. This is the Rebel Author Podcast. So tell us about a time you unleashed your inner rebel.
Excellent. Well, I think we have to go back to the time where everything collapsed in 2008 and I was made redundant. Now, at that time, 2008, I was right in the middle of doing that Olympics legacy work. And I had all of the companies together, and I was the kind of the person who was going to government meetings, and I was doing presentations. My company at that time even did a super film about the Olympics legacy and the opportunity that was there for jobs and the economy, and actually not just having basically a white elephant there. And so there's two things. I lost my job, and therefore, all the people, all the different boroughs in East London, Tower Hamlets and Newham and Hackney and all the rest of it, they were all sort of thinking, oh, what we're going to do now? Kay kind of leads this. So I set up my own company, and I did it very quickly, and I took control of the situation and decided that I was going to do it, even although I wasn't being paid now, etc., etc. There was tenacity there, and the other thing that I will say was that a lot of different strands to that, but I felt very strongly about it and believed in it, and I just spent the last 3 years, I think, since we had actually won the games, actually being around all these companies and digital companies, production companies, broadcast channels, radio channels, London Film School, education places, art places, theatre places. I mean, just endless, arguing the case that we should come together in a group and make sure that something happens to the broadcast centre after the games is over. And so
we were constantly battling against things like, our current Prime Minister was mayor then, and he was saying, oh, we should do a ski slope, an indoor ski slope. Bob's your uncle, job done. And we were saying, yeah, but that's like 5 jobs. We're talking about thousands of jobs creation. So I think if I was going to say that my inner rebel was, despite it all, and we even had someone saying, oh, I can remember him. He stood in the middle of the broadcast centre, which is a 1 million square foot. And he said, you could even, this was to someone that was interested in buying, you could even knock it down and sell it for scrap. And we were sitting there thinking, I was sitting there thinking, that there is no way we've spent millions of pounds building this. We're going to make it something. And now, I don't know if you know, but it basically helped all the government officials get behind it. So we wrote the vision for it, we pushed it out, and we kept pushing it. And it's now home to BT Sport and a huge creative arts and production hub with hundreds and hundreds of jobs in East London. And I mentioned the book because obviously that's partly what I was going through at the time. But I think that's my inner rebel. It's like, I'm not going to let them knock this down and do nothing. And as a group, we were brilliantly strong then, and we made it happen. So something that I think we can all be proud of.
That's amazing. And I love that your rebellion has created a legacy as well. I think that's fantastic. Okay, tell listeners where they can find out more about you and your books and your company.
Well, probably the book, the best place to go is a website that's it's relatively new, kayhutchison.com, KAYHUTCHISON.com. It's Scottish spelling, I have to say it. You got it right, Sacha, which is really wonderful. But I'm also on LinkedIn. There's quite a lot of things about the books there. There's bellmedia.co.uk is my little publishing company with all the books that we've published for children and video games and all the projects that we've done over the years. But I think those two places, kayhutchison.com and bellmedia.com, with an E as in BELLE media.com. I think everything is there.
Fantastic. And I will, of course, leave links to those places in the show notes. Well, thank you very much for a fascinating conversation today. And thank you also to all of the show's patrons. If you would like to get early access to all of the episodes, you can do so by visiting patreon.com/Sacha Black. Thank you also to our wonderful listeners. I'm Sacha Black. You were listening to Kay Hutchison, and this was the Rebel Author Podcast. So just a note to say sorry about the audio. It sounded a little echoey, and I realised as I started editing this podcast that was because my office was still empty, very, very empty at the point that I recorded this. So yeah, sorry about that, guys. Hopefully as a few more podcasts go, as I batch record, you won't find so many with that slight tinny echo in the background. I now have a full office, as you can hear from the audio that I'm recording now. So next week I will be talking to Alex Newton from Kaylytics. Kaylytics is an amazing author service. They provide reports for different genres with a stack of marketing and genre and sales knowledge, and I find them fantastic. I have used them personally myself, and the episode next week is a special one because it will be video as well. So if you don't normally listen on YouTube, then I'd recommend hopping over to YouTube next week because, or perhaps, having them both up, I don't know, whatever, but you will be able to see his PowerPoint as he has like a presentation that he talks through whilst he is talking to me. And for those who definitely don't want to look on YouTube, don't worry, we made sure that you can listen on audio, pure and simple, and you will still completely understand everything that we discuss. So that's next week, and yeah, don't forget to go and answer this week's question, which is, what kind of self-care do you do? All right, and I will catch you next week. Don't forget to tune in and subscribe on your podcatcher. And when you have a moment, please leave a review.